I made up the apron the way I remembered it, that my mother wore it. So I made this up so I could pose, and whoever the model is poses for me should look the way I remember my mother. Turn around.
That's an insult. I'm your mother?
When I started painting, I did paint happy things like flowers and sceneries, happy colors. But once I started painting my memories from my home, I was so drawn that I couldn't get away from it. I'm not the best artist, but my art becomes a vehicle to tell my story.
In der Jung hab ich ungewollen man getreue Mami noch verloren find der Stieb nicht Tuck an Fleck Feigele is auch weg Ui, wie schnell bin ich schon alt geworden.
I'm glad to welcome you to the presentation by Toby Knobel-Fluig. There are many writers of the Holocaust, but I don't think there's anyone else that does work like Toby Fluig. She's the first person to visualize and represent for us the entire life of Holocaust survivors, the whole Holocaust survivor, meaning starting from birth through today, the inheritance of a very rich life of European Jewry before the war, proceeding through the Holocaust and the reconstruction of her life after the war.
I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. Most of my work I have done from memory. I received only 2 photographs from my aunt in New York. I was born and grew up on this farm in a village named Czernica in eastern Poland. My father's family has been there for generations. There were 10 Jewish families in the village. The total population was about 250 families, Polish and Ukrainian. There was no synagogue in the village, and services were held in our house on Sabbath and holidays. We were a family of 6. I had 2 older sisters, Surce and Laice, an older brother Aaron, and they were my parents. Most lived in a house in the village, and their fields were situated in different areas on the outskirts of the village. And that made the beautiful sceneries. My father always worked in the barn, and he used to go out in the fields to supervise the workers. We grew rye, the wheat, and we also grew the buckwheat. We had like a ½ acre land around the house. So in the back of our house, we had a garden where we grew all kinds of vegetables for our own use. I remember as a little girl, my mother gave me a few feet of land there, and I took care of my garden. I grew those vegetables for myself. That was my best fun as a child. The house was built from bunches of straw rolled in yellow mud. This one large room was, during the week, my sister worked there as a dressmaker. My mother baked these wedding cakes for the peasants. And Saturday, it was turned into a shul. I remember my mother used to wake me up in the morning. We have to make the bed because the people are going to come to Davos soon.
Alle Vater kocht die Mame, hilf ich Mamen kochen, hilf ich Mamen kochen. Otta zoi, hilf ich Mamen kochen. Otta zoi, hilf ich Mamen kochen.
The schoolhouse was like a half a block away from my house. When we came to school, there was a Christian prayer, and the kids crossed themselves. That's how the school day started. I was the only Jewish child in the school, and I remember the children used to tease me that I have to cross myself too in the first grade, and I was crying. I came home upset that I have to cross myself. I remember one teacher brought us little boxes of paint, and she asked each one of us should bring a branch from a cherry tree. A cherry tree had a lot of bright colors, red, alizarin, crimson, and the leaves were very lively. So each one of us brought a little branch, and she asked us to make a painting of the little branch with the leaves. That was the first time I had my hands on paint and brush, and I seen a lot of colors there, and I tried to put in all the colors, alizarin crimson and different color greens, and the other children put in a flat green, a flat brown, and that was the painting. So the teacher at that time noticed my ability.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fluick, very much. Now we have time for questions.
Mrs. Coppelson.
Did you paint and draw when you were a child, or is this something that you learned after the war?
At the third grade, my teacher noticed my ability for art, and she suggested to my parents to go to art school, but this was impossible. The closest art school was like 100 miles away. When I came to United States and my daughter was growing up, I went to adult education. I started taking lessons. Eventually, I had a teacher come to the development where I live now, and I had 10 people attending the class. When I was here in the United States, my daughter was about a year or two old. I bought a number painting. Years ago, they sold us painting by numbers, and they gave little tubes of paint. So I made a number painting, and I had some paint left, so I decided to copy this painting, and that's the result that came out. In fact, later, when a few years later, I went to evening classes and I brought this painting to show my teacher. He was asking me, where did you take lessons? And I never had a lesson at that time in my life. So this was like in the 60s, the early 60s. As my daughter got older, I started painting. So that time I painted sceneries and flowers, and then my mother asked me to paint the farm, to do the farm. So I made a pencil sketch of the farm, and then I couldn't get away from it. People would tell me, you want to do a scenery for me? I said, no, I'm busy. I'd like to do from the village to life.
When my mother started painting, she did the one initial picture of Chernitsa, and she would tell me about that. And as the paintings came up, she started talking more and more, and we started writing down the remembrances. And that's when I really learned about her life. Before that, I don't remember her telling me much about where she lived and the farm, just that she was a farm girl, and the city people looked down on her.
I don't think I told them much of the experiences, but when I started painting, so automatically I told her you know, that's how we lived in Chernitsa, and I explained each painting.
She would start painting late because the family was up late, and the only place she had to paint was the kitchen table. And so after everybody was asleep, she would take out the easel. She had a tabletop easel, and she would set it up on the table. In the beginning, she started copying great works of art, you know, Jewish works, I should add. And she would sit, and she would start at 10 o'clock. She would start late, and she would paint, I don't know how late, till late in the night, yeah.
People were amazed that I could remember these things. And people paid a lot of attention to my work. I mean, I was a beginner, and the paintings didn't look that good, but people appreciated those, and that sort of encouraged me also.
This was stuff that was hers uniquely, and it's not just an artist who is capable of drawing the world, but of her life uniquely, and that makes it special.
The reflection, just as I remember it home. I remember as a little girl, the children used to go and bathe in the river, and they were naked. There were no bathing suits in our village, so they used to run naked from, for like a few blocks, sort of, and have a lot of fun. I wasn't allowed to do it because we Jewish people did not dress naked and go in the river. When I come here on the grounds, I always think of my hometown, how the trees we had in the orchards and the apples. And one summer the women came out and they picked apples, and I saw my mother and sister in front of me. So I took pictures of them also.
Wenn ihr tracht wegen eurer Kindheit, der erste Jugend, Vater Mohammed, was gedenkt ihr zum Besten? Wenn ihr gedenkt etwas, was ihr gewinnt gibt für euch? Die schöne, die süße Zechoines, was vermont ihr?
Nur gibt gewinn eine Sache, aber gewiss, dass die Family ist mit uns. Und das ist gewinn das Gitte. Das ist alles, was uns haben gewiss, was sie gibt.
Ich gedenk dem Seider, wie meine Tate ungefähr, dem Seider. Nach mir sagen, mein Mann, wenn ich passen gettet, mein Mann geführt dem Seider, hat mir der Mann das von daheim wieder Tate geführt. Hat gesagt, der Hagude mit demselben Negen wie mein Tate.
Ihr der Mann zu euch in den Jankiv, wenn ihr tracht wegen der Jungen, der Mann nimmt sich ein Tate Mama.
Yes.
In die Schwester, in der Brief.
Schwester, Vetters, Mimis, das alles bei meinem Sach. Ich suche, dass so Gott hat gewinnt helfen. Also gewinnt Kapolen ist da, bis bald gewinnt Führung in Amerika. Das was so tracht an, bis nach Anfang Tag. Ich habe verloren 8 Schwestern und Tate Mama.
Die Sachen, was man gesehen, sind gewesen so bitter, als wie ich sie diese gewesen, als aufgegangen, dass Chassidiskeit hat gesagt, sie ist Stück Gott. Als sieht, als uns so mit suffern, als so nicht so ist.
Die Rigitte Fremden sind geblieben Fremden.
I was born up at Kamyan. It's a small town.
It was 5 kilometers.
5 kilometers or so from Chernitsa. And you walk through the forest. It was very nice, pleasant. My grandfather, Hersch Milgrom, came from Chernitsa. on Shabbos, we would walk all the way onto my grandfather's house. And then at night, he had horses, and he had a wagon, he had a farm, he had a store. He would send us back with a driver to bring us back home, so we didn't have to walk home.
Are you aware that your grandfather was called the Oisha?
Right.
The rich man.
He was called the rich man. He also had an egg business. Sure. They used to go around to collect the eggs from the farmers, bring it to him.
Collected eggs?
Manis.
Manis, yes. Yeah, he was a poor guy.
Poor guy. And
my uncle Mordre collected
Mordre.
eggs. So he was selling it to your grandfather?
Once they collected, they brought it to my Zaidi, and he'd buy it.
Uncle Mordre was my favorite uncle. He was very kind and very nice. And Rivka was an old-fashioned woman. She must have been my mother's age, maybe a little older, but she was dressing still with the long skirts, the old-fashioned way. Uncle Mordre I admired always. I admired him reading the Torah, which I enjoyed very much. He conducted the services. To stop. Uncle Mordre conducted the services, and I admired him very much. There were different categories in the village. There were 10 Jewish families, there were 4 categories. Shimon Katz was a poor man, and we called him the captain. He used to handle, he used to go from one village to the other, selling thread and needles and brushes, and then he would buy in the villages horses' hair, pig's hair, flax, and things like that. That's how he made a living.
So Shabbos, the services in the minyan was at their house. There was not enough Jews, so they used to come from Suchavolim.
A family come for a Shoshana.
But on Shabbos they used to walk. If it was raining, it was bitter. In the fall, it was a little harder. But we still had the minyan every Shabbos in their house.
My father had a very old shtreimel, and now he did wear the shtreimel Shabbos for the services and Yom Tov especially. For Shabbos, my mother used to get up 4 o'clock in the morning to start the baking. It took a whole day to bake, but she baked the bread for a whole week. My mother had her candlesticks, which she received as a dowry. She covered her face, she said, quiet, I didn't hear. But somehow at one point she told me that she said the broche, and she also said whatever at the time was important to her. To beten God, it should come true, whatever the need was for that particular time. And I'm doing the same thing. The holiday was very special to me. I enjoyed all these rituals and everything. The baking and all that was very special to me.
Chad Gadyo, Chad Gadyo, the Zabina bo, Bisrei Zuzei, the Zabina bo, the Zabina bo, Bisrei Zuzei, Chad Gadyo.
Bobby's Kugel's coming. When David went to college sophomore, he had a kitchen. He had his own apartment, an apartment with a couple guys. 4 o'clock he calls me, scares me half to death because they don't call 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? I need Bobby's Kugel recipe. I'm making dinner for 12 people tonight. I need a Kugel recipe. And I said, what do I know? Called Bobby, gave her the number, and she gave him the recipe. And now he makes it all the time. My son once said, it's funny how every family leaves a Yerisha. And Bubby leaves her paintings, but she also leaves the memory of Kugel at Bubby's house. And that's every meal, whatever we're having, there's a Kugel there waiting for the boys. You'll see, you won't have any left. David graduates next year, and Gary starts next year.
Yeah, Gary. You made the Tisch College, right?
Right, Tisch School of the Arts.
And this is, they specialize in...
Oh, I want to do animation, maybe computer animation.
So you're going to go to Hollywood, you're going to leave us?
Yeah.
Do you remember when I was working on my Passover book, and I put the pages on the floor, and I asked you both for criticism. And you both gave me criticism. You were about 9 years old at that time.
Gary was ready to illustrate it for you, Mom. At the bottom, he was ready to draw the pictures for you.
I usually don't use watercolor, and this was one of the first things I really did a real project with the watercolors.
That's interesting. It's a lot of fun to do watercolor.
Yeah, it's really, the watercolors is fun. I look at yours, and I don't know how you do all the shadows and everything. I mean, I tried to put in little things, but it's really amazing.
By the time you're 74, you'll be a better artist than I am.
I like to think that your paintings really did inspire me. Just drawing, just little doodles even. Also that what you paint about, it's touching to see the everything, how you remember it, because you can really, you get something more from paintings than just from talking to you about it and hearing stories. You can really see through your eyes almost, and that's really a great thing.
I remember once giving a presentation at college, and there was a Chinese girl, and she asked me, why do I paint those depressing colors and the depressing scenes? And I was trying to tell her that I'm drawn to that I couldn't get away.
Yeah, I can see in the painting you have the green, the beautiful trees in the background, and it was there, but obviously what you remember, what you found interesting, what you cared about, it was in here, so that's what you painted. Right,
yeah,
so that's.
Yeah, you see, I sat at this table and I did my homework here, and we ate dinner here, and we did everything in that kitchen. When this girl asked me why do I paint the depressing paintings, in my opinion, but it's not. To me, it's not depressing. To me, this was my family room. The family spent the times here, and they were happy times in a way, because I was with the family. There was a lot of love in the family. We had 10 Jewish families in the village, and all the young people were like in the 20s, so I was the only child. But there was so much love in the family that I was happy. My brother Aaron, I remember when we were very young, we just played, horsing around in the house. My older sister was a dressmaker, and that's what she did. She didn't do nothing else. In fact, she didn't do much housework at all. I remember she made, we used to get packages from the relatives from America. So some of the clothing was faded. So I remember there was an old coat, a faded coat. My sister took it completely apart, all the seams she opened up, and she recut it, and she made a coat for me. And I was so proud having that new coat. And I looked up to my sister. I think there was very little contact between me and my older sister, but I looked up for her because she made me my new clothing. My middle sister was a sort of sickly girl, so she used to help my mother with the cooking, with the cleaning.
I used to feel sorry for her. I wanted to help her, so I did a little, but I was on the lazy, the lazy side. I was a spoiled brat, they called me. My father was a very quiet man. He was very happy on the farm. He didn't know anything else. So to do, not that he worked physically on the farm, but they used to hire workers, and my father used to go in the field and sort of supervise. My mother always wore dark colors. She didn't wear any bright color clothes. The peasants used to wear bright colors and flowery designs, and she dressed in very subdued colors, and she dressed us, even the girls, in subdued colors, not flower. Otherwise, if somebody wore a flowered dress, he was called a peasant. And she wanted to get out, not to be called a peasant. It was like people look down at the peasants. My mother was artistic in different ways according what life was like before the war. I remember she baked the wedding cakes for the peasants' wedding. Now she used to put a blob of dough in a big round pan, and then on top she decorated the cake with roses made out of the dough. She made birds, and she used a black seed of some kind for the eyes. She was part of that artistic work that had to be done, which the peasants couldn't do.
My mother had a very, and this is the impression you get, a very warm, close relationship with her mother. She was, even though she says she doesn't like being a Dorfische, it very much molded her world, and I think she liked it. I mean, this was her world. She knew the farm, she knew the chickens, she knew the living in the kitchen of a country kitchen, and that was her world. The family was very close because there weren't 4 million kids running around the town with a cheder and a this and a that. There were very few people, and she had few Jewish friends, and I think when you don't have a whole world of Yiddishkeit around you, it becomes more intense. So her Jewish world was her family.
My mother sang it. She sang it, I believe, and I went to sleep. She sang these songs. In fact, I sang these songs to my daughter, and she learned those songs. And when her children were born, she was singing those songs to the children. And when they came to me and I put them to sleep, I also was singing the same songs. So my daughter knows those songs by heart, in fact. Sitzt am Mame, Leima Wigele singt a Lied und weint. Ai lulu, ai lulu, ai lulu, lulu. The Tate is in America gefahren, Taya Kinder new. Ai lulu, ai lulu, ai lulu, lulu. In Amerika backen Halle in der Wochen. Ai lulu, ai lulu, ai lulu, lulu.
That's a lullaby I sang to my children. They know I Lulu.
Yeah, so she sang it to her children. So there is the continuation of
Yiddish. See, I came in
Yiddish in the family.
Yeah. I know many survivors, they're reluctant to talk about their experiences. How did you express your memories first? Through painting or by sharing them with other people?
You know, we survivors, when we get together, whatever we talk about movies or plays or whatever, we come on the subject about the Holocaust.
I felt very comfortable talking about it from the very beginning. And then when I got involved with the painting, then I realized that I have a bit of a story to tell. And I just had, maybe 20 paintings, and people wanted to buy them. And I felt if I sell the paintings, I wouldn't have the story. So this idea came to my mind that I want to publish a book. I didn't know how to write and much English or speak well English. And it took many years.
We always call my mother Bubby the optimist. There's a certain optimism, a certain determination, a certain drivenness, an attitude about life that when you've experienced the biggest of losses, little bumps along life's way don't faze you. My mother was always had a heart condition when she was younger, and so she was always a little frail, not able to do the housework. But yet she was a driven person. I always wondered how she survived until I started watching her work towards her book. And it is mind-boggling how she was driven, and that's what obviously kept her going throughout the war. She's determined to do something, and when she gets her mind on something, let her do it because she's going to. Because she just pushes and pushes and pushes till she gets what she wants. And in a positive way. She networks. She decided she wanted a book. She talked to people till she networked and found people who would support her and a literary agent, and she got a book out of this. It's incredible. A person who didn't have much education was able to pull this off and get a book published. And be charming in the process. Everyone loves her.
The first years I painted just for my own self. I didn't dream of publishing a book. Yeah. That's the first years I started to paint. But eventually I felt that I had a story.
And then you started writing, and you wanted me to start. You wanted me to write it, and I couldn't write it.
Right.
So we got you writing.
So I continued writing and wrote in English.
But she has little pieces of paper. She'd write on a little slip of paper a few sentences and scotch tape it to another paper and write another paper. So when you got the final story, it was like little slips of paper all attached to one another, because it's not like she sat down and wrote the whole story. She wrote a few sentences and then thought of something afterwards and attached it. So it was scotch taped together. And then all of a sudden, it developed into a narrative. Once my mother started her work towards her book, she did memories of her life before the war. And then someone said, you really need to make it into a book. And she realized she had to start drawing the war pictures. She said afterwards they were very painful to draw, very painful to remember. And she didn't talk much about it. She was always very spare with her prose. She drew the pictures, she wrote the pictures, and I would say, Ma, you have to give more details, you have to give more details. But it took her a long time to fill in those gaps. She didn't want to.
In the fall of 1942, the law came out, the order that all the Jews have to leave their homes and go to the Brother Ghetto. My sister was very much in favor to run away, and my mother too. It was very easy. We could have traveled to Russia anytime without any permission or something. And my father expressed his feeling, and he said, oh, the Germans, even if they come, they go for the doctors, for the lawyers, they are not going to look for farmers. And he didn't want to leave the Vermegen, he didn't want to leave the farm. It was very crowded. And I remember going down the street, and that was a daily sight. The two men with the armbands, with the Magen David, pulled the wagon with a box with corpses. That was, and you could see people on the street dying of starvation, cold. So then, after I was there 6 months, there was a panic. There was a rumor that the ghetto would be liquidated. So my sister encouraged my parents, we should all run away to go to the village. My father, he said, whatever the order was, he wanted to follow. You know, we have to go to the ghetto, and he wasn't willing to go into hiding. So my mother encouraged me to go, and so I ran away with Surtje. We went down in the dark streets. It was snowing at the time, and I remember we were walking through a deserted city. It was in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden we didn't know, we got panicky like, so we jumped down to an abandoned house, broken down house, bombarded. We were stayed there for 24 hours. So we waited till the evening. In the evening, we left. It was a terrible snow, it was very cold, and we walked through the fields. We didn't want to go through the roads, we shouldn't be caught. So we seen a light in the distance, a farmhouse. So we followed that light. We came to that farmhouse. We walked into the barn and we slept over. And the following day we got up. In the morning we said to the farmer that we are lost. We want to get to Chernitsa, and they told us the direction where to go. So then this horrible ordeal began. We were in hiding for a year. So in March, we ran away from the ghetto. I stayed with this woman that took me as a babysitter. My sister went to the village. After a few weeks, she met me, and she said that she wants to go to the ghetto and get, the whole family should leave the ghetto and come and build a hiding place in the woods. In May 1943 was the real liquidation. There was such a panic. People didn't know what to do. They were crying, they were praying to God. And my sister suggested for my mother to come with her. At that time, my mother apparently didn't think, what if her husband wants to stay in the ghetto and hiding? She just left with my sister. The people were wild. Everybody tried to save themselves. My father was hiding in the attic. He was in there for 3 days, and after 3 days he couldn't take it. He was hungry, he was thirsty, so he walked out, he gave himself up. When the Nazis came around, he told to the German, "Before you kill me, give me a drink of water." But of course the German killed him right there. My middle sister was in the hospital. That's all we knew. But afterwards, people that survived told us how the hospital was burned with the people in it. Apparently, my brother was hiding in the woods around Chernitsa, and a forest watchman caught them, and they took him to the police. People used to go to Brode, and they saw him going to work, and they told me about it. So I sent a note he should run away again, and they talked to him. So he says, "They feed me here, I'm working, and I'm not gonna leave the place." He wouldn't run away because he had a bad experience that they caught.
Preist dir die Sterne, lacht dir in Stibaran.
When my mother ran away from the ghetto, my mother and my sister went down in the basement, and they dug out the ground from underneath their body and covered their shawls with the ground. The Germans were running around and yelling, "Juden heraus, Jews come out." And my sister was so frightened that she said to my mother she will go to the next cellar. My mother stayed where she was, and we never heard from her again. The following night, my mother left the ghetto and she came to the village. So I met my mother, and my mother told me how she ran away from the ghetto and what was happening.
This is exactly the way the forest looked like. We would cook here, we lived here, we slept on the ground here. We'd always try to get off the pathway in.
People shouldn't see you.
So we couldn't see you. Here, just to see somebody's coming from there, and it would almost look like that we're meeting another Jew that's hiding here.
During the war, I went once, I was told that there are Jewish people in the woods, and I walked long enough and I did find the families. So I sat down, and there were a lot of leaves that they shoved together so they could sleep. It was warmer to sleep on the leaves. So one man said to me, are you deloused or you have lice? And if you don't, you deloused, don't sit too close to us because the leaves are full of lice. So I moved away further and I sat there. By the next morning, when I got up from sleep, I was invaded. So I stayed with them a few days, and there was a shooting we heard. So we started running, and then I realized that my hiding in the village is safer. I don't have to worry that people go to find me. I was sitting in a cellar on the attic alone. I used to meet with my mother once in a while, and otherwise we used to hide different places because if we went two people to beg for food, they would refuse. They didn't have enough food for themselves, the peasants. So it was harder to get food for two people. So apparently we decided to hide separately. When you were there in hiding, you were scared every moment of the day or night because you didn't know what the next moment will bring. There was a time, I remember, I was sitting outside in the woods and it was for 2 days raining, cats and dogs. And I sat covered with a shawl and I was soaked to my bone. And at that time I said, my goodness, how long would I suffer like that? Maybe it's time to give up. But then half an hour later, the thought of surviving came back to me, and I fought for survival. I was afraid of the common people. It's the Polish and the Ukrainian people that we had to watch out because some of them were very religious. They go to church and they learn that you have to help your neighbor in need. But other people came out from the same church and they just came out with a hatred that you have to kill the Jew. You know, the Germans want to kill them, so they helped to bring them to the Germans. When the Russians came in, we knew to expect the liberation. So I was in an attic hiding, and the thatched roof was torn. So I stood up and I looked down the village, what was going on. So I saw the first Russian soldier. So I went down and I met my mother, and I don't remember that meeting. How many times I tried to dig into my memory, and it was like a moment blocked out. We felt we weren't safe in the village, so we decided to leave the village. So I remember we passed our house, and my mother said, we probably never will come back to this house again. And that's what happened.
El mole rachamim shochem b'marmim hamtzemu nechana tachach kanfei hashchina b'mol kedoshim utorim kezohar harakia mashirim et nishmat kaila genendel Bat Shlomo, שהלכה לעולמה, ועבור שנדרה צדקה ביד הזכרת נשמתה, בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה, לכן בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו, לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא הנחלתה, ותנוח על משכבה בשלום ונאמר אמן.
For the children, for you, for Steve, and that's for myself. I'm eens gesleven weten van mezelf, van gezin. Meer van de kinderen, van de eindelijk, van de meid.
Baba would have been proud.
She brought you up the first 5 years she was with you a lot.
Yeah, well.
And she taught you little songs and little stories.
Yeah, in Yiddish, everything in Yiddish. That's the thing, is Mama Lucia.
You didn't speak English until the age of 6.
I know, yeah, I told her
I
that.
knew that you had to start kindergarten, so I decided to speak to you.
Yeah. Baba didn't speak English at all.
Yeah,
Baba always
didn't.
spoke Yiddish.
No, she never learned.
You have a keen appreciation. You know, it's like, oh, I wish I had spoken to my grandmother, asked her, you know. Never did, you know. Every moment is a little more special. I'm very aware of that with her. So now I'm going to nudge her and get all more stories.
After World War II, they got rid of the ghettos. Yeah.
How did your Bubby get out of the ghetto so easily?
I should get out of the ghettos easily. First of all, she was lucky because they didn't catch her. Because if they had caught her, she wouldn't have made it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do Holocaust education. I go to like a middle school, kind of elementary schools, and I talk about Yom HaShoah and Kristallnacht, and I talk a lot about you and your book. Like I feel like I'm the last generation that's going to have like a first-hand experience with survivors, and the next kids won't be able to have that experience. They'll have to hear from other people.
So this summer, your mother and me will work to put together a slide presentation so you could use it. Otherwise, I'm leaving. Is that the legacy you call
Yeah,
it?
you're sure.
That's the legacy for you to continue.
A death camp. I actually visited Poland and I visited Majdanek, and it's...
When the children ask me questions, why I paint, and I feel that I'm putting down a piece of history, I'm putting it down on paper and canvas. Many people, they ask themselves, why did I survive? And why did my sister survive? And they answer to themselves, but I had a message that will be there for the next generations to come.
Leg den Kopf auf meine Knie, Gita Seufzeli.
Next to the bed was a long table covered with a white massive tablecloth. Everything on the table was jumping. It's festive. Bubby and her family and sisters, dressed in their best clothes, sat on a long bench with their brother next to their father. The youngest of the family, Bubby's brother, asked the fourth question. When Bubby was little, she remembered waiting impatiently to drink the wine with delicious milk. Her father chanted the Haggadah in Hebrew in the same manner and melody as his father had done. Bubby, being the youngest, opened the door for Elijah. Bubby's family led a primitive, hard life. They were very close-knit family, though. They were really not content living in the village. It was a stigma to be a door fisher, which means a villager. Bubby's father was the only one happy on the farm. But she does remember when they passed the farm leaving the village, her mother said to her, "You will probably never come back to our house again."